Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Interarbor Solutions, and you're listening to Briefings Direct. Our next Enterprise Management Innovations discussion explores the role of the modern Chief Operating Officer and how they are tasked with creating new people-first strategies in an age of increased automation and data-driven intelligence. We'll now examine how new approaches to spend management, process automation, and integrated procurement align with developing talent, diversity, and sustainability. To learn more about the leadership trends behind making globally dispersed and complex organizations behave in harmony, I'm pleased to welcome our guest. We're here with James Lee, Chief Operating Officer at SAP Ariba. Welcome, James.
Hey, good afternoon, Dana. Thanks for having me.
We're delighted you're here. So, James, why has there never been a better time to bring efficiency and intelligence to business operations? Why are we in an auspicious era for trying to bridge some of these gaps that have plagued businesses in the past?
So, Dana, if you look at the role of the modern chief operating officer or anyone who's the head of operations, you're increasingly asked to be the jack of all trades. If you think about the COO, you're responsible for budgeting and planning. You're responsible for investment decisions, organizational and people topics, and just generally orchestrating across all aspects of the business. And so to really do this at scale, you really need to drive standardization and best practices. And this is why efficiency is so critical. Now, in terms of the second part of your question, which has to do with intelligence, the business increasingly is asking for not just reporting the news, but making the news. What does that mean? That means you have to offer insights to different parts of the business and help them make the right decisions, things that they wouldn't know themselves otherwise. And that requires to leverage all the data available, do a thorough analysis, and really provide the data that all our functional leaders can use to make the best possible decision.
So it seems that the Chief Operating Officer is a major consumer of intelligence, that the level of insight that an organization can conjure up and present to its executives as Chief Operating Officer, to me, is one of those major beneficiaries. Do you feel like you're getting better tools than ever now that systems like what SAP Ariba is doing for your customers are available to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about being the era of big data. So the information you get from systems, from even from a lot of devices, be it mobile devices or sensors. I mean, we have an abundance and explosion of data. But how to make sense of this data is very tricky. So as a COO, a big part of what I do is really to not only collect the data from different areas, but then to make sense of it, to help the business understand what are the insights behind these data. So I absolutely believe that we are in the day of age where we have the tools, the processes to really exploit data to the fullest.
And you mentioned, James, this need to be a jack of all trades as a COO. What is in your background, do you think, makes you able to bring that level of renaissance man, if you will, to the job?
So, as the COO of Ariba and Fieldglass today, I have operational responsibilities across our entire end-to-end business. So, I'm responsible for helping with our portfolio strategy and investments, sales excellence, commercial model, data analytics, reporting, and then also our learning and talent development. So that is quite a broad purview, if you will. I feel like the things that I've done at SAP and before SAP have equipped me with the tools and the mindset to be successful in this position. So before I took this on, I was a Chief Operating Officer and General Manager of Sales for SAP Greater China business. So in that position, during that time, I doubled the size of SAP's business in China. And we were also involved in some of the largest product launches in China, including S/4HANA. And before that, I've been with SAP now 11 years, and I had the opportunity to work across North America, Europe, and Asia in product roles and operating roles and investment roles and also sales roles. Before joining SAP, I was a management consultant by training. I worked at Hewlett-Packard and then McKinsey & Company.
Clearly, most COOs of large companies nowadays are tasked with helping extend efficiency into a global environment, and your global background certainly suits you for that. But there's another element of your background that you didn't mention, and that's a concert pianist, and having studied that. What is it about your discipline and work towards a high level of music talent and accomplishment that also has a role in your being a COO?
Yeah, Dana, that's a really interesting question. You've obviously done your research and knowing my background. I grew up studying classical music very seriously as a concert pianist. And it was always something that was very, very important to me. And I feel like even to this day, even I obviously have pursued a different profession, but that is still a very key and critical part of who I am. And if I think about the two roles as a COO and as a musician, there are actually quite a few parallels, if you will. To start, as a musician, you have to really be in tune to your surroundings and listen very carefully to the voices around you. And I see that the COO team ultimately is a service provider. It's a shared services team. And so it's really critical for me to listen to and understand the requirements of my internal and external constituents. So that's one area where I see some similarities. Secondly, I believe the COO role in my mind is to orchestrate across the various parts of the business to really produce a strong and coherent whole. And again, this is similar to my experiences as a musician playing ensembles, especially in large symphonies, where as a conductor, you must always know how to bring out and balance various musical voices and instruments to create a magical performance. And again, that's very similar to what a COO must do.
I think it's even more appropriate now, given that digital transformation is at least a stated goal for so many enterprises, but being of an orchestration and harmony and organizing across multiple silos, if you will, is essential. You could think of the woodwinds as a silo, percussion as a silo, what have you. Do you see that as well, that digital transformation really requires companies to think differently and not exist in just their specific contribution, but to think and feel as part of that larger whole?
Yeah, absolutely, Dana. From the customers that I've spoken to, digital transformation, to be successful, it has to be a top-to-down movement. It has to be an end-to-end movement. So it's no longer where management just says, hey, we want to do this, without the full support and empowerment of people at the working level. And conversely, you have people at the project team very well-intentioned, but without senior executive support, it doesn't work. So in cases where I've seen a lot of success, companies have been able to break down those silos, paint a overarching vision and mission for the company, brought everyone onto the same bandwagon, empower them and equip them with the tools to succeed, and then drive with ruthless execution. And that requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of synergies across the organization.
And then I suppose another lens through which to view this all is that people-centric view, that talent cultivation. And why do you think that might even be more germane now, particularly with younger people? Many observers seem to think that millennials have a different view of things in many ways. What is it about cultivating a people-first approach, particularly to the younger workers today, that is also top of mind for you?
Yeah, Dana, we just talked about digital transformation. And if we think about technology, no matter how much technology is advancing, you always need people to be driving the innovation. I mean, this is the constant, no matter which industry you're in or what you're trying to do. And it's because of that, I believe the top priority is really to build a sustainable team and to nurture talent. And there's a couple of principles that I really adhere to as I think about building a quote-unquote people-first team. First and foremost, I think it's very important to go beyond, because we talk a lot about people first being, hey, work-life balance. But in this day and age, you have to kind of look beyond that and start thinking about how do you help people on your team derive meaning from what they do. And this goes beyond just work and life and balance. This has to do with social responsibility, personal enrichment, personal aspiration, finding a commonality and community amongst your peers. And I find that now, especially with the younger generation, a lot of what they do is virtual. We're not necessarily in the office all together at the same time. And it becomes even more important to build this sense of connectivity, especially when people are not all present in the same room. And this is something that millennials really care about. The other thing is, I think for millennials, it's important for them at the beginning of their careers to have a strong true north, meaning that they need to have great mentors who can coach them through the process, who can work with them, who can develop them, and give them a good sense of belonging. And that's something that I always try to do in my team, ensuring that the young people on the team get mentorship early on in their career. They have one-on-one, a dedicated time. There's always a sounding board for them to air their concerns or questions.
And James, you mentioned that the COO, in your case, is orchestrating a team of other operations professionals. What do you look for in them, in their background, that gives you a sense of them being able to fulfill this jack-of-all-trades approach and perhaps have a cross-matrix of understanding of peoples and cultures, more of a liberal arts understanding, but also understanding and discipline in business and technology?
Right. I tend to think about successful individuals or teams along two metrics. So one is your domain expertise. Obviously, if you are in charge of, say, data analytics, your background in data, being a data scientist, is very important. Likewise, if you're running sales operation, a strong acumen in sales and tools and processes is very important. So there's obviously a domain expertise aspect of it. But equally, if not more important, is the mentality. I tend to believe in people who are of a more growth mindset as opposed to a closed mindset, tend to achieve more. So what I mean by that are people who tend to want to explore more, want to learn more, who are open to new suggestions and new ways of doing things. The world is constantly changing. Technology is changing. The only way to keep up with it is if you have a growth mindset. Secondly, along mindset is to have this, we talked a little bit about this earlier on in the podcast, which is having this COO team being a services team or being a shared services team. So having a service mentality, understanding who your ultimate customer is, be it internal or external, and listening to them, understanding what the requirements are, and then working backwards and looking at what you can create or what are the insights that you can bring to them. That is very critical to me.
All right, let's change tenor here a bit. I'd like to take advantage of the fact that I know you travel quite a bit because SAP, Ariba, and Fieldglass are global in nature. Certainly SAP is global in nature. I'd like to try to understand some of your observations, what you're seeing in the field. So what do you hear out there as you travel that strike you as the major trends impacting global businesses? What are your customers telling you, and through the lens of being a chief operations officer yourself?
Yeah, it's really fascinating as I travel the globe. I've had the privilege of supporting our business across the Americas, but also Europe, Middle East, Asia. And it's fascinating to see that there are a lot of differences and nuances, but there are a lot of commonalities. At the end of the day, what people expect from procurement or digital transformation are more or less the same, very similar. So there's a couple of trends I'd like to share with you, Dana, and your listeners. One is increasingly when we talk about procurement, the end users are looking for a marketplace-like experience. They're very much, even though we're in a B2B environment, but they're very used to B2C user experience, like Amazon, where they can do shopping, they have choice, it's easy to compare value and features. But at the same time, you have all the policies and compliance that comes within the four walls of B2B. And that's something that is starting to become a lowest common denominator. Secondly, we talked about millennial, and I think the millennial experience is really pushing everyone to think differently about what is the user experience for not just Ariba and Fieldglass, but for any software. How do we ensure that there's easy data access across different platforms, be it your laptop, your desktop, your iPad, your mobile devices, right? They expect easy access, seamless access across all different platforms, right? So that is something that I would call a millennial experience. Thirdly is we obviously are very honored to now have Fieldglass as part of the Ariba family. And now that I've spent more and more time with the Fieldglass team, so in the future, there may even be a situation where there are very few permanent contracted employees, where you have a lot of project-based or function-based contingent labors. So that is something that we hear a lot about, and how do we provide them with the tools and systems to manage that entire process with contingent labor?
That, to me, strikes an interesting challenge for COOs. How do you best optimize and organize workers who work with you but don't work for you?
Right. And you can't simply treat, it's very different because when you're looking at indirect procurement, direct procurement, you're talking about goods and you're talking about materials. But when you're talking about contingent labor, you're talking about people. And when you talk about people, there's a lot more complexity than if you're buying like a paper cup or pen or pencil. So you have to think about what does the end-to-end cycle look like for them? Like, how do you recruit them? How do you onboard them? How do you enable them? How do you measure their success? And how do you ensure that they have a good transition out of the project they're working on? And so Fieldglass is one of the few solutions in the market who really understands that process and can adapt to the needs of contingent laborers.
All right. One more area from your observations around the globe. The definition and concept of the intelligent enterprise. It strikes me that that must vary somewhat, and that certain cultures or business environments might accept more information, more data, more analytics differently than others. Do you see that to be the case? What's sort of the lay of the land globally when it comes to this? You know, we imagine optimistically that everybody wants to take advantage of being more intelligent as an organization, but that must mean different things to different people.
Yeah, I think at its core, if you look at the revolution of the enterprise software, enterprise solution, we've gone from being a very transactional system where we're the system of bookings, where we're system of record of bookings, where we're just tracking what is being done, to we start to automate, to now what we call the intelligent enterprise, which is making sense of all the information, all the data that you have around you to create insight. Again, going back to one of our first questions about insight. So I think a lot of enterprises are now looking at, a lot of companies are looking at how to transform to the intelligent enterprise. It means a couple of things. It means that you need to be able to have access to data, abundance of data around you. And we talked about the different sources through sensors, through equipment, through your customers, your suppliers, sometimes even from market, your competitors, so 360-degree of data. And then it's how do you have a seamless system that analyzes all this data that's in front of you, and how do you actually then make sense of it? And when I say make sense of it, the intelligent enterprise takes it to the next level, which is leveraging artificial intelligence. Is no longer a person or a team sitting in front of a computer and doing Excel modeling. This is the age of the birth of artificial intelligence, and so now we're looking at predictive analytics, where, for example, in Ariba, we are looking for patterns and trends in how you're conducting procurement, how you're doing contracting, how you're doing sourcing, and then suggesting actions for the business to take. And that, to me, is an intelligent enterprise.
So I want to rephrase a question I asked you earlier, and that is, isn't more intelligence and more data an excellent tool for COOs, that they're consumers of this? So let's up the scale on that to include artificial intelligence. How do you view the maturity of artificial intelligence in a few years as an accelerant to the COO's job? How important will AI be for COOs as they start consuming it and look to take it to a higher level even more?
Yeah, AI is absolutely a critical topic as it relates to not just procurement transformation, but any transformation. And I would say there's kind of four main areas that are addressed with AI, especially the advanced AI that we're seeing today. Number one is it allows you to drive deeper engagement and adoption of what your solution and what you're doing. If you think about how we interact with systems through, conversational, sometimes even through gestures, that's a different level of engagement than we had before. You're basically involving the end user in a way that was never before done. It's very, very much interactive, and it's very intuitive and avoids a lot of cost when it comes to training. Secondly, we talk a lot about decision making. So artificial intelligence gives you access to a broad array of data, and you uncover hidden insights and patterns while leveraging artificial intelligence. Thirdly, we talked about talent early on. And I believe that having artificial intelligence actually helps you attract and retain talent with state-of-the-art technology. You have self-learning systems that helps you institutionalize a lot of the knowledge. And last but not least, it's all about improving business outcomes. So, you think about how you increase efficiency through very personalized, context-specific information. You're improving in the context of procurement, approvals, and accuracy, especially when you're dealing with contracts. A artificial intelligent robot is a lot less prone to error than a human working on a contract. We have stats to prove it. And at the end of the day, we look at procurement and we see that there's an opportunity to really transform it from a very tactical, transactional function to a very strategic function. And what that means is artificial intelligence can help you automate a lot of the repetitive tasks so that procurement professionals can focus on what is truly value added.
Yeah, I really believe that we're on the cusp of an age where we're going to start to really determine what it is that the people do best and seed that to them, and then also determine what the machines do best and let them do it. So that brings me to my next question, and we are getting close to the end. The whole topic of bots and robotic process automation is quite prevalent now across the globe. Do you have any observations about what bots and RPA are doing to your customers and how they like to consume and use that? And also, how does it appeal to you as a COO internally at Fieldglass and SAP Ariba?
Yeah, when we talk about bots, there's kind of two types of bots that come to mind. One is in the shop floor in a manufacturing setting where you have physical bots that are replacing humans and what they do. And secondly is you have these virtual bots, if you will, that, for example, in Ariba, we have bots that analyze data and make sense of the patterns and provide insights and decision-making support to our end customers or end users. So in the first case, I absolutely believe that the bots are getting more sophisticated. Kind of tasks that they can take on in the shop floors are a lot more than what it was before, and it drives a lot of efficiency. It drives down costs. It allows employees to be redeployed to more strategic, more higher value add roles. So I absolutely see that as a positive trend going forward. And when it comes to the virtual bots, we see a lot of advancement now, not just in procurement, but in the way that it's being used across sales systems. And for example, in HR systems, I was talking to a company just last week. They are actually utilizing virtual bots to do the recruiting, the interviewing process. Can you imagine that? The next time that you're submitting your resume to a company, on the other end of the line could be not a human that you're talking to, but actually a robot that's screening you. It's now to the level of sophistication where it's hard for you to tell the difference.
Well, I might feel better about that if there's less subjectivity and the person interviewing me didn't have a bad sleep that previous night. I might be okay with that. Sort of like the Turing test, right? Do you know whether it's the real boss or a virtual boss? Okay. Before we close out, James, any advice for other COOs who are seeking to be taking advantage of all the ways that digital transformation is manifesting itself, that can look to organizations like SAP Ariba and Fieldglass for those tools? What advice do you have for COOs who are seeking to up their game?
I think fundamentally, the COO role is what you make of it. In a lot of companies, we don't even have COOs. So it's a very unique role. There's no predefined job scope or job definition. For me, a successful COO, at least the way I measure myself, is what kind of business impact do you have? When you look at the P&L, everything that you do should have a direct or a strong direct impact on your top line, but also your bottom line. And if you feel like the things that you're doing are not directly impacting the P&L, then it's probably time to reconsider some of those things.
All right, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a sponsored BriefingsDirect discussion on the role of the modern chief operating officer and how they're tasked with creating new people-first strategies in an age of increased automation and data-driven intelligence. And we've learned how new approaches to spend management, process automation, and integrated procurement align with developing talent, diversity, and sustainability. So a big thank you to our guest. We've been here with James Lee, Chief Operating Officer at SAP Ariba and Fieldglass. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Dana.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining us for this BriefingsDirect Enterprise Management Innovations discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Arbor Solutions, your host throughout this series of SAP Ariba-sponsored BriefingsDirect interviews. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.